we're going to talk about Michael Turley, who was the oldest ever sentenced to death in Australia. And tell us the story, because something happened before that or after that.
Yeah, look, last week I was telling you about the 1863 murder on the property 300 miles west of Brisbane. And it was one of the best crime stories in Queensland, the mid-19th century. And it was the eccentric Michael Turley, who rode through Ipswich on his way to shooting and killing the station manager at Mitchell Downs. He was convicted of murder, and at 70 years old, became the oldest person ever sentenced to death in Australian history. But Turley's story doesn't end there. After his sentence was handed down, the executive of the colonial government examined his case. They were looking for any mitigating circumstances that allow them to spare the old man's life, but couldn't find any. And so his execution was set to take place just 4 weeks after his trial on the 7th of August, 1863, at the old Brisbane jail on Petrie Terrace.
Right.
But Danny, where there's life, there's hope. And on the day before that Turley was to hang, a reprieve was granted. His sentence was commuted to penal servitude for life. Now, it was while serving that sentence on Petrie Terrace that Turley met a Chinaman by the name of Shampoo.
Shampoo?
Now, Shampoo...
I use it on my hair.
Yeah, well, this is a very early shampoo from China. This is in 1863. Now, Shampoo and Turley, they lived in separate cells, but became mates because they shared the same exercise yard. Now, Shampoo had initially served 3 years for attempted murder of the station manager at Yandilla, up past Toowoomba. And then in 1860, Shampoo actually murdered a shepherd at Clifton Station by slicing him 12 times with a razor. But, Shampoo was convicted and sentenced to death. But like Turley, his sentence was also commuted to life.
Wow.
Now, it was while he and Turley were in jail together that Shampoo welcomed the news that the station manager, the one that he'd previously tried to kill, well, he had now successfully been murdered by another employee at the station. Now, that murderer wasn't as lucky as Shampoo, because he actually became the first man to be hanged at the old Toowoomba jail. And incidentally, the late station manager's wife, she was from Redbank here in Ipswich and got married for a second time at Ipswich's St Paul's Church.
Turn it up. It's building. We're building. Come on, start building a bit more.
Yeah, look, anyway, the eccentric Irishman Turley and the Chinaman Shampoo, both murderers, became friends. But Turley by now was around 80 years old. He was increasingly prone to violence, so they certified him as a dangerous lunatic. All the papers required, they were completed to get him taken out of the prison and to Woogaroo Lunatic Asylum at Good. But the Colonial Secretary declined to act. Now, the Colonial Secretary at the time was Arthur Palmer. Now, Danny, you probably remember, if your mind like a steel trap, you'd know that it's actually Palmer's daughter-in-law, Day, is the ghost that haunts the historic home at Dover Court that I've told you about before. You remember that? Yes. Anyway, Palmer left Turley in jail when perhaps he shouldn't have been there at all. It was at jail on the morning of the 25th of February, 1871, when the turnkey, Henry Cox, was watching over the yard where Turley and Shampoo were. Now, turnkey is the old term for prison warden. Anyway, Cox left for breakfast before he was replaced. And it was during this period with no guard that tragedy struck. A disagreement must have happened, and while Turley was bending over, Shampoo hit him across the head with a broom and killed him. Anyway, I know it was scandal because the government let him down. He wasn't protected and so on. Anyway, Cox, the turnkey who left his post, he kept his job and later became the principal turnkey and retired on a handsome pension. The Colonial Secretary, Arthur Palmer, who left Turley in jail when he shouldn't have been, he became the 5th Premier of Queensland. And now the double murderer Shampoo, he won a reprieve when he was declared a lunatic and transferred out of the jail.
Oh.
But Michael Turley, well, he was already the oldest man ever sentenced to death, and then the oldest man ever to have his death sentence commuted. And at 80 years of age, he became the oldest man ever murdered in jail.
Oh,
and Danny,
yes.
It all started back here in 1863 when Turley was armed to the teeth with his long white hair and white beard flowing in the wind. He rode through Ipswich on his way to commit the murder on Mitchell Downs.
What a story.
Ipswich is truly centre of the universe.
He built it. It was like building blocks of nature. And I fancied being killed by a broom. Must have been a big broom. But he was killed by a broom.
A big heavy broom.
Yeah. Oh, well, he swept out of your life just like that. Mate, now, how can we find about this story? Because you've got some great stories on your website or your Facebook site. And tell us how we can look at this and many other great stories that are true stories about Ipswich.
Yeah, there's over 300 short stories there on historyouthere.com. In fact, go to historyouthere.com. You can hear and read part one of today's story about the murder of Mitchell Downs. And, of course, tomorrow morning I'll upload part two, which I just told you about, murder of Mitchell Downs, historyouthere.com.